This is For Advisors by Advisors. I'm your host, Evan J. Mayer. And today we have a very special guest in Derrick Kinney.
Evan, thanks so much. It's great to be with you.
Hey, Derrick, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Evan. Thanks for having me today. Looking forward to a great conversation.
Pleasure. Derrick is the CEO of Good Money Framework. Derrick was a financial advisor for 25 years. 2 years ago, I think, is when you left the financial advisor realm and started Good Money Framework. And now he is in the business growth expert, helping advisors to attract clients. Just wrote a new book. We'll talk about that momentarily, but there's a wide variety of things. Derrick, tell us a little bit about your history in the business as a financial advisor. How'd you get started? What did Ameriprise look like in the early days when you started? And what kind of progression did you take throughout your career there?
Yeah, let me go back a bit further. So when I was in college, my dad always told me, Derrick, just get your degree. It's a stepping stone for things yet to come. Well, I didn't really know what that meant. It just meant take a lot of classes and figure out what you liked and what you don't like. And so I squeezed 4 years into six, working part-time, kind of paying my way through. But I graduated with a liberal arts degree, specifically in communication. So I love to give talks and speeches and be out in the public. What I realized though was that nobody really cared about that from a hiring perspective. So I had like 3 jobs available. One paid $19,000, one paid 25, and one paid 27. So I took the one that paid 27. So I became the marketing director for this software company. And about a year and a half into this, weekends and getting emails from the boss of, hey, by the way, I know it's Friday, but Saturday is going to be a work day. And my paycheck bouncing twice, I finally said enough was enough. And I'd always had an interest in money. I love to make money and save it and invest it and even give advice to other people kind of on the side. And so I decided while working full time to go back in the evenings at the time with IDS Life, which became Ameriprise Financial, great firm, loved my time there, and became a financial advisor. And the problem I had though was I was kind of this young punk, 24 years old, and I realized, okay, why in the world really would people work with me when they could work with other people with the gray hair, the experience, all these things? And there was this aha moment that occurred. I'd always had a passion for education. So I went to Sam Houston High School here in Arlington, where I live today. And I always wanted as a student for people to come back to the high school and tell us how the real world really was. Like to tell me, why am I taking Spanish right now? Because I don't care about it.
Why do I need algebra if I don't know how to balance my checkbook?
Why do I need algebra? Why am I taking economics? You know, things that are just so ethereal. And what I realized was I wanted to fill in that gap. And so I began to go back to my local high school and I recognized a teacher of the month and a student of the month and gave them like a $25 and a $50 gift card. It was nothing, but to them, for whatever reason, it was like they won the lottery. And what I realized was that when people feel heard and recognized and appreciated, they will do really whatever you want them to do to help you grow your business. So a couple weeks later, I get a phone call. And a woman says to me, Derrick, we want to move our investment account over to your firm. And this was like the 3rd time this had happened in a couple weeks. And so I finally said to her, as unprofessional as this was, why are you calling me? 24 years old, I'm brand new in the business. And she said something that changed everything. She said, Derrick, we want to work with you because you care about the things that we care about. And it was in that moment I realized, oh my gosh, she assumes I can get her returns and provide good service, but those are commodity items that everybody else does as well. What they wanted was an advisor who cared about a bigger cause that they could be a part of. And it was that thread, kind of that contrarian thinking that I had, weaving generosity into my business that led me to the growth that I had and ultimately to be able to sell it and now do the things I want to do to help more advisors weave generosity.
So let's take a step back though. Tell us, so you get licensed, you're in the business. I really want the nitty gritty, right? Like you were working nights, like 7 to 10 at night, cold calling?
Yeah. So when I first started, basically I was working probably 70 hours a week. And I got some advice from a mentor. There was a group at church that we would be a part of, and an advisor came and talked to our Sunday school class of all things. And as I sat there in the room listening to him talk, I thought, how cool is that? He's talking about money. He's in front of people, helping people. I want to do that. And so he ended up mentoring me into the business. And so he told me some advice. He said, Derrick, become a friend with the phone. He said, it's the phone that takes away the best and the brightest people out of this business. And it was so true. I was not the smartest guy in the training class. There were people who were leaving CFO jobs at big companies. These were smart people that I thought, oh my gosh, I could learn a lot from them. They washed out in a couple weeks. But it was me and a handful of other people that just recognized the phone is your friend. Back in that day, it was just repetition of getting to the person who wanted you. It was like panning for gold, essentially, but 70 hours a week. And it was typically 7 in the morning till probably 9 or 10 at night. And even to this day, when I leave the office at night, it reminds me of, look, you got to do the hustle to get anything worthwhile in your life.
So you build up your practice. Were you always for that entire 25 years in the employee side, or did you ever go into the franchise model that they have?
Yeah, so I was in the franchise model. So
Oh, to start.
about year 5 or 6,
Okay.
Ameriprise gave us perhaps one of the biggest blessings, and that was the ability to be a franchise, if you will, to be that model. And to this day, it was one of the biggest blessings to me because I didn't know much about that. All I knew is serve clients, grow the business, and it gave us a scalable asset down the road, which I actually sold my business 3 years ago, January 2020, to a longtime advisor I've admired, John Cutton. He's the top advisor within Ameriprise, and he's building a national organization. But what it enabled us to do was to really have an asset on our net worth page, which is so rare these days, but back then it was revolutionary. And I look back on those days fondly. I was with Ameriprise the entire 25 years and built great relationships. And ultimately what I found is, and people may debate me on this, but there's a lot of great firms out there and you may look, well, this gives a higher payout here, higher payout. Ultimately, people are buying you, the individual advisor. They assume the company you picked isn't bad, or else you would have made a really dumb decision. They assume you know what you're doing.
Yeah, they're not working with the name on the door. They're working with you, the advisor.
Yeah.
So you talk about good timing, January 2020, right before the
Yeah.
pandemic. Come that March, you're probably thanking, everybody that you sold it when you did, and the person that bought it from you is probably like, oh, it's a tough timing, I guess. How did that negotiation go? Because you, with the Ameriprise franchise, you had to sell to another Ameriprise advisor at the time, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So there's some great companies, the financial advisory brokerages that are out there. And the company that I ended up using, I had bought 2 other practices from other
Okay.
advisors through that. And so I flipped the script and said, hey, because I like them and like this model. And what happened was early on, the first practice I bought was in Dallas back in 2009, Evan. And I remember going to several banker friends and they would not loan me money because they didn't recognize the value of recurring revenue. It wasn't an asset like land or a building. They couldn't get their head
Yeah.
around it. But one smart banker told me, he said, Derrick, he said, if you need to liquidate your entire retirement account to buy that business, do it because it's going to be worth it based on the models. And that advice served me very, very well. So when I then sold my practice, the goal was to position my practice as a way for some advisor to be part of a regional piece here in Texas. And
Got it.
so the goal was to systemize things so well that Derrick stepped out, new advisors stepped in with motivated team, happy clients. We ended up with a 99% retention rate. And that was the
After your
gift.
move, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately I wanted to look my clients in the eyeballs a year later and for them to not feel like I handed them off, but I handed them up. And I got to tell you, that was humbling because I thought I was a pretty darn good advisor.
How big of a practice when you decided to sell?
Yeah, about what do we have? Touching 300 million in assets. I had a couple hundred clients.
And
I was
what made you take that move? 300 million under management, your own office. There's the excitement of doing things that you've always maybe wanted to do, which sounds like speaking and writing is something you always wanted to do. But that's a lot of money to walk, a lot of guaranteed money to walk away from, and a good practice to walk away from. What caused you to do that?
Well, and I wrestled with that. So what I do, Evan, is I go on a sabbatical every year and I take about 5 days completely by myself. I ask myself 3 questions. How can I be a better husband? How can I be a better father? And how can I be a better business owner? And this was July of 2019. I was in the W Hotel there in Boston. That was the place I picked. And I began to write a list down of all the things that I would enjoy doing. And my philosophy was, if I'm going to run really, really fast the whole year, it makes sense to take 1 week out of that to
Yeah.
know what I'm running toward 51 weeks out of the year. Okay. And so I wrote a list out of write a book, launch a podcast, coach, speak, consult. And surprisingly, on that list, as much as I enjoyed it, was not being a client facing advisor. And it was in that moment I realized, okay, if I'm feeling this right now and I continue to be an advisor, which a lot of people do, I don't begrudge them of this because the income is so good, I would actually do myself and my family and my clients a disservice and my team. Now is the time for me to sell. And what I had to get my head around candidly was I'm giving up a heck ton of recurring revenue. But what I realized was, yes, I'm giving that up, but I'm monetizing it in the present value now that buys me runway to then launch another business model to build up recurring revenue again. So essentially, it was a way to back myself against the wall, which I tend to work the best in. I got some advice from another advisor back in the day, and he said, Derrick, how I'm successful is I bite off more than I can chew, then I chew like hell. And so that was the reminder to me of this is the time to start chewing. Even if you chew a little bit loudly, you got to chew because you got to make your way through.
And so you make this move. I'm sure your wife and your friends and your family are all like, what are you doing? Like, not that you wouldn't be great at what you do today, but like that's a pretty good lifestyle on 300 million under management to basically run your practice the way, come into the office when you want, grow it how you want. But at the end of the day, if you're good with relationships, you could keep that. Doing that must have caused a lot of stress and anxiety. Obviously, the sell happens. What's the first step after the sell happens? Is it get the website created, get the content going, really start sharing my mission? Or did you already kind of have some connections already set up and so it was easy for you to hit the ground running?
Well, what made this unique is I wasn't selling my business to take on another job. There was nothing else firmly in the offing. And so let me go back a step. My wife was supportive from day one. But one of the things I committed to do, because part of what made my practice successful was the high touch that I had where they felt like they were working with Derrick, even though they worked with other advisors. It was just part of the culture that we had. So I made it a point to call every single one of my clients personally to let them know the news. So that began the first week of January. And Evan, I'll just be candid with you. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Because when I called each person, it was like playing a videotape of our history of how they became a client and working together and the ups and the downs. And I got to tell you, some people were excited for me because they said, Derrick, you're doing what you've helped us do all these years. Some people were flat out angry with me. How can you abandon and leave me when we're about to retire? I thought you were going to be here the rest of our lives. But one lady, I thought she summed it up the best. She said, Derrick, if you're going to have a midlife crisis, just buy a Corvette. It's a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I got to tell you, just being vulnerable, it was February, middle of February, when I had finished calling all the people. I broke down in tears. It was so heavy, the weight of calling all those people and letting them know this decision, because sometimes I was questioning myself as I called these people, but I wanted them to make sure they were in good hands and that a year later they could say, Derrick, you gave us to the right group of people. So that was the first step for me. And once that was done, that really gave me a sense of taking the burden off of me because I wanted to handle that well and end well. That was important. The other piece was then determining what is my next business model. And so one of the voices in culture that I began to hear a lot, and I talked about this with clients, was people in the media would say, if you have a lot of money, you're bad. Or making money is bad. Or if you're the business owner and super successful.
Elizabeth Warren mantra, yes?
Well, yeah, then you're the villain in the story. And I was like, that is flat dead wrong. And so I then began to craft this message of the Good Money podcast. I wrote the book, Good Money Revolution. And the point of it is if you say to somebody, hey, go make money, that can lead to some hollow feelings of, I know I need to make it. And people say you've got to make a lot of it to have the life you want. But a lot of people do make a lot of money, and then they realize I'm no more fulfilled than I was when I had $100,000. And they wonder, I just got sold a bill of goods.
Yeah.
I wanted to do was, could I put a framework together of how I built my practice of tying meaning to your money, a cause to your cash and purpose to your profits. And that way there was a motivation to go make more money as the owner to then do more good. And what I found was surprising, as I related earlier, it enabled me to invite new clients and quality team members to work with me because they knew they could work with any advisor. I was a commodity item, but I was decommoditized because of the generosity piece in my practice. Clients were attracted to that because they were part of a bigger story. And my team didn't want to just have a job they showed up at, clocked in, clocked out. They wanted to know they were making a difference in people's lives and making a difference in their. That was one of the factors that had set our practice apart. And so I wanted to take those principles and say, look, here's a new way. And I believe now this is the future of small business, that people want to work with companies. They could buy a pen or a purse or any item, a phone from any company. They assume the quality is going to be average or above better. But if they can be part of something bigger, they'll actually spend more money doing it. So what I then had to overcome was so many people are taught, well, give in secret and don't tell people what you're giving. And you need to be generous privately. And that's all good. And that sounds very altruistic. But what I found is if you put it out there in an appropriate way, people want to come alongside you. I mean, imagine if you send a blanket email or a cold call to somebody, or you say, you know what, hey, there's a cause I'm passionate about. Invite 3 of your favorite clients, have them bring their friends. Well, now you're meeting some prospective people while serving together, building this memorable experience. Then you take a picture together, you send a nice thank you note with that picture. Well, now there's a relationship and there's trust that's formed in absence of a cold call. I mean, which one is likely going to lead you to more business?
Yeah, for sure. So what's a good piece of advice you give to the advisors out there that are on the come up? The ones that maybe do have the sales ability, don't have the relationship ability yet. What are some things they should be implementing or some things they should be thinking?
Well, let me get real nitty gritty here. And let's talk about how you can stand out in your local community. Because the reality is, if you're in a social setting and someone says to you, what do you do for a living? And you say those dreaded, awful words, I'm a financial advisor, you can see people's eyes roll back in their heads. They have this mental checklist. Oh, you sell insurance, you sell mutual funds, and they write you off. And now you're in this box. And so what I would tell people is you need to invite people into a relatable problem in social settings. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're at an event and there's a social afterwards, you're kind of mixing around meeting people, and you come across, let's say, a woman named Linda who's a personal trainer. And you ask her about what do you do? And Linda says, well, I create workout plans for people, help them get in shape. And you say, oh, that's great. You might ask about her education and where she does her lessons, all those kind of things. Well, then as the night goes on, you're meeting other people and you come across another trainer. Let's say his name is Bill. And you say, Bill, what do you do? Oh, I'm a personal trainer. And you say, well, I've kind of heard this before. And so Bill says, you know how busy executives and financial advisors want to live their best life and be the best version of themselves, but they need to be in shape to do it? I create workout plans that are customized for them so they can be the cool grandparent that's on the floor with their grandkids and they never run out of energy and they live the life they want. Let me pause right there. If you needed, Evan, to hire a personal trainer, which of those 2 personal trainers would you be more likely to hire?
Yeah.
And I think you know the reason. It's because that personal trainer said things to me that addressed concerns I was thinking that were deep inside of me. I don't want to be the grandparent who can't run with their kids, who can't be on the floor and can't live the life they want. And so what I would tell advisors is when you're at that Rotary meeting or the Kiwanis Club or a church or wherever you're at, the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, what do you do for a living? You say this. You know how so many people worry about running out of money in retirement and how embarrassing it would feel to have to go back to work? We create a financial blueprint for success to give them confidence and live the life they want. And the person says, well, now what do you do? And then you say, well, we specialize in, insert the problem that you specialize in. The whole goal of this is you want to own a problem. Own a problem, you own your success. And you want to be memorable so that you create this situation where when people leave there, they're like, that's the person I want to work with because empathetically, they feel like you understand their concerns. If you say I'm a financial advisor, you're in a box.
Yep.
If you want to kick the box and stand out and differentiate yourself, that's the way to do it, is invite them into an acceptable common problem that they immediately recognize.
Excellent. Tell us about the book, Good Money Revolution. It hasn't been out that long, correct?
Yeah, actually, it just hit the 1-year anniversary. So
Okay.
it came out 2/22/22, and I fought hard for that release date, Evan. I was like, if
Yeah.
we do a good money revolution, we got to be revolutionaries on 2/22/22.
Yeah.
The cool thing is it actually has hit the USA Today list. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and all of that's fine. But just between you and I, you don't make a lot of money selling books.
No,
Okay.
but congratulations on that. That means people are reading it. If people are reading it, that alone is a success.
Well, and that's how I judge the success is if people are DMing me and emailing me saying, "Hey, I'm putting these principles into practice and they're working." That's what's powerful for me because it opens up doors for speaking and consulting and coaching, this kind of thing. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to put a message out there that counteracts culture and says, no, money is perhaps the greatest lever for positive change you can have. Now, it doesn't mean if you don't have money, you can't affect change. But what I'm saying is, I want to give people a reason to go make the money they deserve so they can do more good. So, if an advisor, for example, has been up against this $500,000 revenue ceiling for years and feels like this is just where I'm at, this is all I'm meant to make, I want to bust that ceiling and say, no, if you need a new motivation, let your clients know, look, a portion of our proceeds going forward are going to support this cause. You'll be surprised by how it reinvigorates you and your team because we know hiring right now is uber competitive. It's going to make you stand out, but it's going to attract higher net worth clients to want to work with you because all of us, I mean, Maslow was right long time ago. We all want this self-fulfillment. And if, as the advisor, I think perhaps the most important service provider in people's lives can give them that door. We simply give doors to our clients so they can walk into a better story so they can live the life they want. And if you do that, you'll be paid well because you're helping serve clients really, really well.
Is the book more targeted to anybody in business and using that giving mantra as a successful tool in it, or is it more focused for financial advisors? Who is the target audience?
Yeah, anybody with 20 bucks in their pocket is the ideal person. The book is actually written to individuals, but there's parts of the book that wise business owners, I think, can take. And there's a story I talk about with a gentleman named Dave, who I met with just a couple years before I wrote the book. And he'd come in the office just, overwhelmed. You could tell his body language that he was wearing the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I said, Dave, what's wrong? And he said, Derrick, I'm not motivated anymore to go to my business. He was a local business owner, well respected. And for some reason, the words shot out of my mouth, Evan, is there a cause that you care about? And he began to tell me a story about a trip he had taken his family on years earlier. And the village they went to, the guide talked about how it was so impoverished. It was so in economic decline because of the lack of a school building for the kids to be educated. School building would equal success in that community. And he remembered exchanging that glance with his wife as if to say, wouldn't it be cool to fund that school? He gets back, life gets busy, but my comment brought it back. And I said, Dave, what if you did this? You set a goal to increase your sales by 20% this year and take half of that increase and use it to fund that school. Well, we begin to talk about ways to do that. Well, he goes back to his business, comes back in not 6 months later, but 3 months later. The guy looks younger. He looks invigorated. He looks like he's back on his A game. And I said, Dave, what happened? You look completely different. He said, I went back and I put a picture of the school as I imagined it on my website. And I called it our generosity purpose at our company. Let my clients know, let the team know. Their business began to grow because he was an engineering firm and people could buy what he was selling from anybody, but they couldn't buy his passion for making the world better along with a great product. And so his business soared. And so when he came back in, they had already funded half of that school. But the bottom line was the bigger story. Dave was reinvigorated. Here's a business owner who now had a reason, a compelling reason. The stakes were high to go make more money. His team was no longer just punching in, punching out, working for anybody. Now they're helping make the world better. And his clients got excited. They were telling other people to work with Dave. So the bottom line is you might think it's just going to cost you money, but when you weave that in, it makes you more motivated to make more money and do more good. And then you become a pillar in the community, well respected, and people want to work with you. It's just a beautiful model. And I use it in my business. And thousands of business owners and financial advisors across the country now are doing the same thing and reporting similar results.
Fantastic. That's excellent to hear. And obviously a lot of good. It's not only happening for the business owners, but also the charitable situations that they're giving to. So amazing. What's a piece of advice that you would give to that older advisor that is considering getting out of the business? They want somebody to take over their practice or to help take over their practice. They want to do other things in their life, but they still enjoy managing assets. What's potentially a good way to get done with that, but also do good like you are doing?
Well, I think twofold. One would be determining what is it that you want to retire to and not just from. Some advisors may make the savvy choice for themselves of, I no longer want to do this full time, but I don't want to give up the revenue. I may want to work 10 hours a week in the office, but be professional about it. Let your clients know, hey, here's my new structured schedule so that you have purpose. So many advisors just kind of drift off into the wind and you never know if they're going to come in or not. And they're in shorts and a golf shirt. And it's confusing to the team and the client. So you want to be defined. But if I can go a little bit deeper, Evan, this is something I learned when I was buying practices, and it causes so many people to miss out. So many people mistakenly think that they're going to tell the advisor who's selling their practice, selling their baby that they gave birth to, your baby is not worth what you're asking for it. And they're going to try to talk them down off that price. All that does is irritate them and takes you off the list. What I find is you want to let that advisor know, look, you deserve to get paid this price and probably more. And I'm honored to be the steward of your practice. I want a year from now that as you and I are having a glass of wine together, or a cup of coffee, that your clients say to you, Evan, you're the hero. Are you picking Derrick to buy your practice? You really did us good. And the goal is, even if I'm not the highest bidder, they like me and I respect them. That got me as a finalist in so many practices, led me to buy 4 practices when other people weren't buying even one, because they tried to undercut and they tried to tell the person they weren't worth it. I would let them know, even if I had to pay a premium, because I could add value, I knew it, by adding systems and structures and scale. Ultimately, don't miss out on short-term price reductions for long-term increases in revenue, which can dramatically impact your net worth and your ability to serve clients.
It's a great piece of advice, because probably more often than not, they're hearing your practice is not a fully running, self-sustaining vehicle, so it should be worth this multiple. So that's excellent advice for advisors out there. By the way, Derrick, promote your website for a minute, because I think you do a multitude of things. You do some advisor coaching one-on-one. I know you have some online content that you share, and then you also do some engagement with big audiences as well.
Yeah. So Good Money Framework is the website. And what my passion is sort of, I think of myself like a guide who has gotten to the top of the mountain in terms of the mountain I was climbing. And I want to help other advisors get to the top of that mountain and not have the same mistakes that I made along the way. So that's the goal of the coaching and the speaking. But what I find is that right now, if you want to stand out as an advisor, you've got to weave in generosity and own a problem. And so we teach advisors how to do that, where we want to make the competition irrelevant, where you become the go-to advisor in your local community. Also, if people want to buy the book, we're giving away the first 5 chapters for free, completely for free, at goodmoneychapters.com, goodmoneychapters.com, where they can at least kick the tires and get immediate value right away. We're also on Instagram at Derrick T. Kinney.
Excellent. Excellent. We found each other on LinkedIn. You're on there as well. Excellent. Derrick, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate the time, the feedback, and I think all of us can do some extra generosity. And if we can add it into our practice, you're saying we're not only going to help people, but our business is going to grow as well. And I think that's a double win sword. So excellent. I appreciate it, Derrick.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Evan. Great to be with you.
Thank you. For advisors out there, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.